I make videos on both of my African cichlid tanks, but the focus for this video today is actually going to be this Tanganyikan tank over here. I've got 13 different species of Lake Tanganyikan cichlid in here, and in this video we're going to do a deep dive into every single type of species that are in this tank, and we're going to combine that with some research that I've done around these cichlids as well, so that you can get a really nice, well-rounded approach on how to keep and care for these guys and have some ideas if you wanted to set something up like this. I have mixed a lot of different species from Lake Tanganyika. It's not something that is unheard of, but some species in particular, like the Tropheus that I've got in here, are not a type of fish that you would generally be mixing with other types of Tanganyikan cichlids. They are the guys that you can see darting around, really active everywhere. Some of them are this beautiful, nice orange-yellow color. Some of them are very dark, but they've got a beautiful red shimmer to them. The red ones that I have in here are called Tropheus species Red Moliro, and so you may also see them be called Moliro Red Morii though as well, I've seen, but they are the red Moliro ones. Then I have another species in here as well, which is the Tropheus Black. The first one I've got is a Firefox. So even though they do not look black at all, they're a hybrid that people have bred over time. They're a black species of the Caramba, from what I can see, that are missing pigment, which is giving them that really nice, beautiful orange, but that's why they've also got some kind of patches of white and stuff. We also have another one in here too, which looks a little bit like the Duboisi species, but it's technically part of the black species, and that one is called a Bemba Red, but I've also seen it be called a Bemba Red Morii too. These guys love eating algae. In fact, they've actually got a snout that has been developed with a bone structure especially for grabbing onto algae, and their teeth are located very close to the front of their mouth as well, so they can grasp little strands of algae. Apparently the best real estate in the lake is a rock that is close to the surface and that actually goes above the surface, because that's like a prime algae grazing rock for them. If a male gets a really good territory, then the females wander in and the male tolerates them being around and will breed with those females. Moving on to our next type of fish, which I'm going to choose to mention second because it's another one that really stands out in this tank. That is our leleupi. The Neolamprologus leleupi are a really interesting type of cichlid. They're this beautiful canary yellow, and they have such a unique type of body as well. They've got that really slender mouth that reminds me of the dinosaurs from the land before time. They are just so beautiful whether they're male or female, so they're not sexually dimorphic, they all just look the same. I didn't know it at the time, but if you want to breed them in an aquarium, you have to get a bunch of them, so around 6 to 8, pop them into a tank and just hope that a male and female pair up, because they can be quite particular about their mates. They do pair up for life. Once you've got a pair, you can just keep breeding them, which is awesome. And these guys have had around about at least 3 or 4 lots of fry in there. They just like to build their little home under this big boulder that's here, and the parents do a really awesome job defending them. It does look like they might have some eggs in there at the moment that will probably end up hatching, which is great because I'm going to try and actually suck those fry out next time that they lay them and see if we can raise some leleupi babies. The issue though is you will just see there's a predatory fish in there that's hanging around as well, which is an attenuates, a Lepidiolamprolgus attenuates, and those are those long slender fish that are in there. I've got 2 of them. They get to around about 15 centimeters, and they're a predatory type of Tanganyikan cichlid, and they do prey on small fish. I would say that in the night time that those may be hunting the babies, and that's why the fry aren't growing up, even though the parents are doing such an awesome job defending them most of the time. And I don't think they will be able to survive in here without me taking them out. They are not the only ones that have had babies in there now too. There is another type of fish in there as well called a Neolamprologus tretocephalus. They are also known as a poor man's frontosa because people used to get them instead of frontosa when they were cheaper and more readily available, but now they're actually less common and more expensive than frontosa. So I've got one pair that tends to breed in the rock mound just next to the sump intake, and they've had a few successful batches that they've started to grow up a little bit, but then again the fry just disappear one day and are gone. So that seems to be a bit of a common theme. I may end up raising some of those as well, since they're not awfully common, and it might be good for some of the fish stores to have some more of them available in stock. Another fish, which is personally one of my favorites, are these fish called Altolamprologus compressiceps, or gold comps for short. And these guys have a really slender, thin body. I've got 5 of them in here, and they are particularly slow growing ones. So they were even smaller when I got them, but I wouldn't even say they've doubled in size since I got them. They do take around about 5 years to get to full size. That's how slow growing they are. But you can see some really big, beautiful ones in Lake Tanganyika, some adult ones that they actually catch in there. But in the aquarium hobby, we end up with quite small ones that we've got to grow out. The guys I've got in here have actually grown pretty decently though. Like there's some of them that have gotten to be quite big. So another one that looks very much like the gold comps in there is one called a black calvus. So they're known as also a Altolamprologus calvus. I've got 2 black calvus in there, and I just love the way they look. They look exactly like the gold comps, but they've got a black body and they have these beautiful white dots on them, which reminds me of a galaxy or a starry night. I think they're really gorgeous and exactly the same as the gold comps as well. They tend to be more slow growing and more carnivorous. I've got white calvus too, which are another type of calvus that are naturally occurring in Lake Tanganyika. They look exactly the same as the gold comps and the black calvus, but they're just white with some speckles too. The white calvus are the ones that I added in most recently, so they are the smallest, and that size comparison can give you a bit of an idea of the size of the gold comps as well when I first added them in, and the black calvus. Now, another personal favorite, I know I'm just saying they're all my favorites, but they're all just really interesting and fascinating in their own way. I do love the ventralis, an Ophthalmotilapia ventralis, or a butterfly cichlid they're also known as. I'm just going to call them ventralis for ease, but I've got a pair that I got from Atlas Aquarium. Thank you, Finn, if you're watching. And they have also bred potentially once. I think I saw the female holding eggs in her mouth once, but I haven't noticed any breeding since then. They've got these beautiful long fins with little white tips on the end of them too, and they tend to hang more around the top of the water, I found, and also keep to themselves a lot in that rock structure. They are very clever when it comes to feeding. I've noticed that they stay away from the main mass of fish here, and they know that the water current, because of the sump sucking the water down, is going back that way, and so all of the food starts to flow towards the sump, and they just catch it from the surface as it's going towards the sump, so they don't have to compete with all of the other fish for food. So they're quite clever, those little fish. Now, we've only got 2 species left, and they're also very interesting ones. So the next species we're going to talk about is a sardine cichlid, or a Cyprichromis leptosoma. I've got the yellowtail ones, and I've also got the Leptosoma utinta, which is the red tail type, which are also naturally occurring in the lake. Nigel from Aquarium Central gave me the red tail one, which is nice and beautiful. He's a big male, and they're worth quite a bit because they're not as common, the red tail ones. And he is just saying hello right here, looking gorgeous with his beautiful blue face and body and red tail. Then there's also what I believe to be another male with a yellow tail that's here. And then we've got some small silver ones that still have a lot of growing to do, but I think they may be females or just really small males. And they absolutely love the brine shrimp eggs. So Nigel sent me some little brine shrimp eggs. They're going to sell them with Aquamunch later on in the year, but they're not available yet. But instead of hatching your brine shrimp, you can basically mix these eggs with water and feed them to fry and to small fish. And apparently that's just really popular amongst these sardine cichlids when they're younger. They really like that brine shrimp. And then lastly, it's not because it's a type of shell dweller that I left it to last. Well, I think it's a type of shell dweller, but we've got the Julidiochromis transcriptus, which is actually one that is very popular amongst a lot of people. I really like them too. I think that they're cute. I don't have any shell dwellers, you'll notice, because I'm not much of a fan of the shells that come with the shell dwellers, but they are growing on me. I might potentially get some in the future, but this is the closest one I do have to a shell dweller, although it doesn't need shells. It can just deal with having caves and stuff in there. But I've got 2 of them. They look kind of like a saltwater fish to me. When it comes down to why I believe that this actually worked, so the most important thing, I believe this is true even if you're keeping Lake Malawi cichlids, is having a tank that is big enough. A nano tank, things can go wrong a lot faster because you're dealing with a small volume of water, which means that your parameters can shift really quickly with any minor change that happens. It can mean that you're needing to do water changes because nitrates, unless you have a very heavily planted nano tank, can get out of hand in that really quickly, and there's going to be less space for fish to be able to establish territories, so you're more likely to encounter issues that are aggression related, and it's also going to be harder for you to to create enough hardscape or enough area that there can be obstruction between the view of different fish, which is also something that can then lead to more aggression if they can see each other and can't really get away. The other thing for these guys that I would add, other than a large tank, would just be adding them when they're juveniles. If you add them all at the same time when they're smaller fish, then they're going to get accustomed to each other, establish territories with each other, and grow up like one big family, basically. You're more likely to encounter problems if you let your cichlids mature and then you add some new smaller ones in. I have added some in every now and then, but they're still not fully grown, and the ones I've added have not been overly dominant ones. For Tropheus in particular, you want to try and add them when they're all juveniles all together, and if you were going to add more, you would want to remove the ones that are in there and then add them all back in together. Having enough rocks to create lots of places for algae to grow, for territories, to break lines of sight between different fish as well, which is why I recommend a bigger tank. It's going to give you more opportunities to create a larger hardscape and to have more areas for the fish to be able to hide. If you don't care about it looking natural with rocks, you can also use things like pipes and stuff to, like PVC piping for fish to be able to have tunnels in and hide in. Lots of food, so making sure that there's not scarcity and they're not getting territorial and aggressive about food. I just feed these guys once per day and making sure that you feed them to suit all of them. So feeding an algae-based, plant-based diet like spirulina flakes mixed with a low protein pellet and brine shrimp every now and then to keep more of the carnivorous fish happy. So just making sure you're meeting all of their dietary needs will keep them happy. Lastly, it just comes down to general water quality too. So these guys have a pH of about 8.4. You can deviate a bit from that. My tap water here is a 7.5 and I just raise it to an 8.4 using a combination of buffer, which I add in when I do a water change, and I've got heaps of crushed coral to help raise the KH and the pH in the sump of this tank. I did a video all about general hardness, carbonate hardness and pH a while ago, which I'll link in this video too in case you want to check it out. As long as they're above a 7.5, they should be okay. Stability is what's most important with that pH as well. So you just don't want to have big swings. So if you are raising the pH like what I am to an 8.4, then if you're doing a water change, you want to make sure that you're adding in some type of buffer, because it's unlikely that your crushed coral in your sump will be enough to be able to buffer for that. And then temperature too, you just want to make sure that you've got a heater so it's staying consistently between around 24 to 27 degrees, and you don't want to ever get too hot. So they don't tolerate really warm temperatures like above 30 degrees Celsius very well either. So just keeping that nice kind of more tropical but not too hot temperature for them, and consistent, really important too. They can be a little bit more sensitive to ammonia and nitrites, which you just don't want anyway in your tank, as long as it's cycled and everything. But then you just want to make sure you're doing big enough water changes to get the nitrates out. So around 50% per week is recommended for these guys, just to make sure the nitrates aren't getting too high. In African cichlids, nitrates can be a little bit of an issue. In other tanks that are planted, the plants are going to take some of those nitrates out. Often for African cichlids, the only plants in the tank is algae, and algae is not going to be eating up those nitrates as well as what some plants can. Just making sure the water's really well oxygenated. The lakes that they come from has a huge surface area and it's got quite a strong current going into the lake, so it's very well oxygenated, all of the water in there, and they don't tolerate low oxygen levels, which is one of the reasons they don't do well with high temperatures. You can add oxygen to your water by having movement on your surface of your water, or by adding something like an air bubbler that's creating bubbles that are then causing surface agitation on the water too. And if you've got a sump too, a sump is another opportunity to get a little bit of surface agitation and oxygenation through the movement of the water as it goes through your sump. All in all, I hope that this has been interesting for you and it inspires you to potentially set up your own African cichlid tank, and shows you that sometimes it can be okay to try things that are different and that are new as well. You can have that combination of what other people in the hobby say, the research that you've done, and your own experiences and observations with fish as well. As long as you've got a plan B and you're being responsible about it, I mean, this hobby is something where you can, you know, test the limits and try different new things. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Make sure that you check out the merch as well, and if you enjoyed it, give it a like. Let me know what you think of this combination, and if you've ever kept an interesting combination of fish in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.